Hey, in this video, I'm going to show you an overly aggressive opening that also works for intermediate and even advanced players. But there's a catch. In this opening, you're not going to sacrifice one pawn, not two pawns, but three pawns and a bishop. And your king will be in a much worse position if you don't follow the exact opening I'm going to show you. So the game will go something like this: e4, e5, and then f4, the king's gambit. Your opponent will capture this pawn because it's a completely natural move. You're going to develop a knight to f3, and he will play bishop to e7, looking for an attack on this diagonal. You're just going to ignore that and play bishop to c4. And then he will give you a check on bishop h4. Now in this position, what you can do here is you can take the bishop. Well, most of you will take the bishop here, but taking the bishop is a mistake because it will take with the queen. You will go pawn to g3. He will take the pawn on g3. And if you take, then yeah, this is not a good position to be in. And he will just develop a knight and just castle. You're just going to lose. Yeah, so in this position, you don't take with the bishop. So what do? Well, I won't be able to move my king because if I move my king, then I won't be able to castle. So let's just push the pawn on g3. Well, what if he takes? Now what? Now, of course, we're going to have to capture, right? What if I capture? Now, he's just going to give you a check and your position is ruined. You won't be able to castle. And yeah, you will be just prone to checks. And he can basically just bring out his knights, his queen, everything, and just demolish your king. So we don't want that. If you in this position, if you don't follow what I'm saying, you will be in a losing position. So we play pawn to g3, preventing the check on the king. He will take. And now in this position, you don't take back, you just castle. Isn't this a bad move? No, it's not. He's still going to take the pawn here. You're not going to take the pawn. You're going to make this pawn your shield and just sit behind that pawn. I mean, basically it's in front of that pawn, but you get the point. So in this position, he might go here or maybe, go here because this bishop is hanging. So in this position, let's say he defends the pawn here on g3. Well, if you're paying a lot of attention in this match, you might be able to see this bishop is looking at a pawn right here. Well, what can we do with this pawn? Well, surely not sacrifice the bishop, right? Right? Well, yeah, you sacrifice the bishop. And once the opponent takes the bishop, you can initiate your attack as you want. You can go here, and our opponent is basically just done for. Let me just show you a game that was played by 1600 ELO players. So this is a match that was played by two 1600 ELO players on Lichess. So the game started off with e4, e5, and f4. Again, the king's gambit. And then the opponent captures the f pawn. And knight f3, bishop c4, bishop to h4. Now, pawn to g3. And then he takes the pawn, obviously. And then he castles. And he takes the pawn on h2, the king slides to h1, and then the bishop moves to e7. Now, if you can see, this bishop is looking at this pawn right here, and of course this bishop gets sacrificed. So the king takes the bishop, so the knight goes to e5 check, the king goes back, and then queen h5 check. So now in this position, the black king is kind of in a predicament. The only move here to play is this. If you're paying a lot of attention, you might be able to see a pattern. So the pattern is knight takes on g6. You can't take the knight because your rook is hanging. So what do? Well, it was black's turn. So black played knight to f6, hitting the queen to basically prevent this discovered attack as soon as the knight moves. White just takes the knight, sacrificing a full rook, and bishop takes f6. Now, the knight moves to e5, checks the king. Now, if the king moves here, that's checkmate in 1. So the king has to move to e7. Queen f7 check. And then in this position, knight to c4 check. Now the king has only 2 legal moves. If he goes here, then this is checkmate in 1 move. But of course, that didn't happen in this game. The king went to c5, and then queen d5 check. And in this position, a3 check. And now, either this or this, both are checkmates. And in the game, this was played, and this is checkmate. I mean, you can even play this. That's even checkmate. So this was the game.